I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Dietrich. Jordan Rodelli is on vacation. And Andrew Kuo never takes a day off. He won't do it. No days off. I mean, other than the days he technically takes off. But he's here today. Andrew, how are you, buddy?
Doing amazing. I'm living in the present in a fantastic way, man. I feel pretty incredible.
Why is that?
There's some good news today, man.
Is it that Cookies Hoops, the world's most influential basketball podcast, is now officially on Patreon? Is that the good news that you're referring to?
If you're listening right now, you're one of those kings, the royalty that has signed up to listen to this episode as it drops. We went to Patreon, man. How do you feel about that?
I feel like it was the right time, and we're going to give people their money's worth, and it's exciting. So this is the first episode that's dropping immediately for subscribers. And if you're not a subscriber, you can still hear it. It'll just be a couple days afterwards. So we're not going to deprive you of content. We don't want to take cookies away from anyone, but we will make you wait a little bit. But we'll counteract that by offering some discounts and some early
Discounts on
access
what?
to Sick Drip.
Ooh.
The fattest and most booyah causing dripware.
That's money, baby. We briefly mentioned it last week, but we did not take this move to Patreon lightly. Me and you have been debating and thinking about this for a really long time, and we wanted to make something worth it for everybody. And giving people free stuff is something we really wanted to do. And now it seems like we need to progress like everybody in the universe, and we need to think about how to be sustainable, and hopefully this interaction will be even better than before.
You are so present right now. It reminds me a lot of I don't know, Michael Jordan. Just the way you're here in the now, in the moment. Wow.
Listen, Scott Burrell can eat shit. That guy can fuck. Scott Burrell. I'm in the moment. Yeah, man, I'm the MJ of launching Patreon.
Yeah, that's fair. A lot of people are saying that. I'm just thinking of the opportunity of The Last Dance at that moment to drop Eminem's song. Dun, 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 dun.
I mean, we're absolutely going to get into the music, but I was waiting for some acoustic Green Day, man. Was this a time of my life? I'll never know now.
Yeah, we'll get into The Last Dance shortly. I was like, drop 100 gags.
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
Just do it. Just do it.
Oh, you haven't heard any rap this episode? Let's hear some shit. Ooh, yeah.
So we're going to talk about the 9th and 10th episodes, the ultimate and penultimate episodes of the Michael Jordan hagiography, The Last Dance, where finally Michael Jordan was able to tell his side of the story.
Can I ask you, this is maybe, I love that word, hagiography.
I think it's pronounced hagiography and not hagiography. I've been going with haggy just because.
It rhymes with better words like shaggy. What's that Jay-Z word I'm looking for? Anyway.
Swaggy?
You know what word I was thinking about last week? You asked what slang terms have I had difficulty saying. Lit is one I cannot say. And I remember the one time early on, I think you were at a party and I had asked how it was. I think I was at home like I usually am, being social. at home, and I was like, "How's the party? How's the party? Should I go?" And you wrote, "It's lit." And I had not been accustomed to that word yet, so I thought you meant like the old bar lit. So I was like, "Oh, are all those old 50-year-old dudes in noise bands there?"
Is it Max Fish and the lighting is on?
Yeah, yeah. Is everything kind of like smelling a little bit like mop water, but also cigarette butts?
It's lit is a word that I have trouble saying like, it's not really irony or sarcasm, and I wouldn't say it now, but it has to be said in a tone of voice, almost like cookies. It's like,
Yeah.
it's lit. It has to be Travis Scottish. Like, how's the party? Oh, it's lit.
Yes.
Like to be like, oh yeah, it's very lit. Doesn't really work. And that's the same thing with texts. I think it has to be read as it's lit.
Yeah, totally. I've been trying to incorporate that into my speech pattern.
Lit?
And yeah, and it hasn't happened in what? It's been like 7 years, 6 years.
Yeah, it's been long enough that it's made its way into New York.
not lit.
It's made its way into New York Times crossword puzzles. At which point it has gone dark.
That's fair. And it's a drug term, right? Is like, does it refer to crack or marijuana?
I don't know the genesis of it. I mean, it just means it's popping.
Yeah, it's so funny, like trying to find the origins of these.
Popping, also not a word that can be said.
I
unless
kind of
it's-
say that a lot. I say
It
pop.
says the same kind of way. Like, yeah, it was popping. I guess it was lit. It was like solidly illuminated.
Right. I say popping, but in terms like a lot of this stuff happens when I'm like done cooking, and I'm like, food is in my hand over the sink, and I'm like, it's popping. But you're right. I can't be like, oh, this is definitely popping. Actually, I do say that.
Popping works though.
Yeah, I like popping.
Yeah, I retract that. Popping is totally fine. Like, how was it? Oh yeah, it was pretty popping.
Sufficiently popping.
Totally works.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Also,
maybe it's
lit
just that
works.
lit has to be said with a lilt,
Yeah.
a,
But
a sort of an upswing. It's
Yeah.
lit. There needs to be a momentum to it.
right, if we were sharing like a technologically advanced pizza pie with two toppings that present 4 flavors or 3 flavors, 3 flavors, and I was done with my first, and you were like, "Yo, how was that first flavor?" And I said it was pretty lit. You'd be like, "Excuse me, please leave the table."
Our good buddy Deezus from the show Deezus and Marrow did a
Name drop.
promo for us, which we've played, I think, on our 200th episode. And he says it's very lit, talking about cookies, and that was the nicest thing anyone has ever said about this program.
Is it? I love it.
Man.
You love to see it. I've been watching their show. They are hilarious, man. They like cookies for a while. We're providing a lot of content during this quar. Awesome. They went to Showtime, and I was wondering how that transition would be. They're hilarious, man. They still got it.
They are genuinely some of the funniest human beings I've ever met. We were on Vice at the same time as them, so they're on maybe 2 or 3 episodes from that era, and they were also on 2 or 3 episodes when we were on No Wave. I've known Deezus a really long time. Marrow not as long, but decent amount. Funniest people I've met in real life prior to them having like a showbiz career. They are genuinely incredibly funny people. Shout out to them.
And nice. I remember one time me and you were at a game and we met up with them. They were in seats kind of close to ours, and then we went to a spot just to like grab a beer before everyone took off. And some kid at the bar was Googling him, and he looked over and he's like, "It's me, man. You can say hi." And they ended up chatting for a while. I thought that was kind of a quintessential New York lit moment.
Yeah, I feel like I was with Deezus and he was like throwing Heineken bottles in the street like 18 years ago. Anyway, breaking news. Those really funny guys are funny.
Right.
You heard it here first.
The funny guys remain funny.
So in other news, because that was not news,
Nope.
there have been some, let's say, lightly promising, somewhat promising indications that we are on the way to a drug from a company called Moderna that hopes to generate the same kind of antibodies that one would have if they had suffered from coronavirus as a kind of vaccine. And that news came out that it was seemingly successful in some trials. That's a nice bit of information. Did that cheer you up today?
Man, I am so deprived of wins, unlike Michael Jordan, that certain small things make me really happy. That thing is not small, and it made me really put a little wind in my sails, Ben. And I think, when Trump got up there and talked about last week, when he was like, we might have an expedited vaccine, I thought that was realistic. A lot of scientists err on the side of pessimism because of the nature of their work. And I understand when people are like, it's going to take a year. But other scientists were like, if regulation has changed, if legislation has changed, there will be a scientist or company like Moderna that expedites this very quickly. And they're saying maybe by 2021, January to June, we could see, if everything goes right, we could see a vaccine that has an effect. And I'm very excited about that.
Does time go faster now? Because it used to take a month to travel via a stagecoach somewhere. Now it takes, an hour on a plane. Mm-hmm. Like for the same trip it might have taken.
Yeah.
You would mail letters. They would come back a month later. Someone's like, yeah, it's fine. Ha 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 ha, nice. Sending back your letter.
I used to order records with money orders, like Sonic Youth and Dinosaur Jr. records to SST, and it would be like, you'll get your 7-inch in 6 to 8 weeks. I'm like, can't wait. And then when it would come, I'd be like, yes, I have this record.
And in the same way, let's say like dating or something. Oh, you'd meet someone and you talk on the phone or, versus just like texting or swiping. I'm more speaking to not only technology. Does time speed up as well? Is time a reflection of expectations of how long things take? Have humans developed a shorter threshold for, say, being inside due to COVID in the way that we might have said years ago, well, it's going to take, 18 months. It's going to take 2 years for a vaccine. So we're just going to sit inside in our house. Vaccine.
John Vaccine.
For our vaccine. Has time sped up? I don't know.
I think about this exact subject more than I should, just because of my life experience. And my answer on Monday, today, would be no. I think I'm convinced your memory has a way to your memory kicks in at certain rates that things do seem like they take forever or things seem really tight. And I think that's just a faulty part of the way our brains work. Mm-hmm. And when you say like, oh, I remember being out in the streets with my old friend, it seemed like yesterday, and then you're like, oh man, remember we were talking about D-Nice and the quarantine parties? That seemed like so long ago. It's like our memories don't work the same ways as other people's brains. So I believe the way time moves is malleable. I think you can slow down.
I think I have no theory here I'm not even suggesting anything or arriving at a conclusion, but that idea is sort of interesting, right? Mm-hmm. Or if you were on a farm and you were gauging your year by the seasons. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's time to plant the crops. It's time to harvest the crops. It's time to, pull up all the things and burn the fields and replenish it. And those are the markers of your annual year. Oh, looks like it's time to slaughter the lambs. Mm-hmm. Now we're going to hunker down by the fire with like our lamb jerky for the next 3 months. Mm. in those kind of situations, I wonder if you have greater tolerance for like periods of inactivity.
It all
Does your
depends
brain
on,
like contract and expand based on the things that you are subjected to? Where we're confronted by nonstop news every single day, like just all day, just access to a torrent of information that, especially right now, is unprecedented.
Yeah, and I think we can handle it, and I think we have always been able to handle a lot as people, as a society. Like, it's funny when you see old pictures of Metro North or trains commuting to the city. Everyone's has their head in a newspaper. There's a lot of information in a newspaper.
Yeah.
But I think, since this is a basketball pod, I always think about a rebuild and the Knicks rebuild. And, I think I really enjoy the Knicks, so it hasn't seemed like a long time. The things I love seem shorter. So it feels like the last 20 years have gone by in a flash because I love all these bad players. And when I state my point of view about what I think the Knicks should do, it's always like with 3 or 4 years, with a 3 or 4 year cushion. And I think that time goes by so fast that we should allow ourselves not to jump at like an opportunity that triggers next year. So I think so you drew the analogy of a farm and went to slaughter animals, or maybe went to pick corn or something. If you went through a drought, or if you got foreclosed on, or you went through a divorce, or your kid broke his arm, it would seem
kicked in the head by a cow.
Right. It would seem slow. But if none of those markers happened in your memory, it might seem fast.
Yeah, thinking about basketball, when the Sixers were doing their rebuild, the narrative was that this has taken forever. Will it be worth it? This is so long.
Joel Embiid is already getting older. It's crazy.
Like, it actually wasn't that long, man.
No.
It was, Hanky was there for like 2 years. You compare that to how bad the Knicks have been bad, how long the Sacramento Kings have been bad.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, wait a minute. They built a team that could contend for a decade in like 2 years, more or less.
Mm-hmm. And isn't this so much about language? Because the word rebuild kind of alludes to working from nothing. And I always think of the term classic rock. And when I was a kid listening to rap records, older people would be like, yo, you got to listen to real music, like classic music, like, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, like real good bands. They're like, what you're listening to now isn't real, and this is the classic rock. But now that we sit here, and the rap records I enjoyed as a kid are older than the classic records that I was being suggested to listen to when I was a kid. And the word classic kind of misleads your memory because it's kind of like it's frozen in time a little bit. And Reasonable Doubt came out a really long time ago. And we don't call it like classic rap. We just call it foundational, whatever positive term.
Old school, baby.
I mean, old school, right. Old school, but it connotates something different, right? Old school is a judgment. Old school is almost someone saying they know more than you. I've never heard...
What is the cutoff line that we would qualify for like modern rap, say? Because I think it depends on who the gatekeepers are. Who is determining via their own age what is old and what is modern-ish. Like, is Reasonable Doubt, does that qualify as old school, or is Jay-Z still around enough that it's just sort of seminal material from an all-time great? But at some point, you will have the kind of people who grew up never really caring about Jay-Z in control of those messages, and they'll say, oh no, Jay-Z might as well be Big Daddy Kane. He might as well be LL Cool J, or a star of yesteryear. He doesn't get to qualify as modern music anymore. And we're moving that up to Drake. Drake is now the end point of contemporary rap music.
Maybe like You said that, and the immediate artists that came to mind were Odd Future and Lil B. I'm like, they were the beginning of modern to me. Like Cameron
Look,
is
the
old
NBA
school.
started with Allen Iverson,
Yeah.
and maybe rap started with Odd Future.
I mean, the internet, like these away from Canal Street mixtapes and towards streaming Dat Piff mixtapes, right?
Haji Beats invented production.
Maybe, like, me. I think
Left Brain is the creator of rap.
drum and bass invented all of music in my record book, so you know where I stand.
But this is the same thing we'll get into when we talk about The Last Dance and sort of the boomers umbrella. Like, are they fighting for this as being relevant, or are they fighting for this as remembering a time when it was relevant? I don't know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everyone has
Are
a
you
different agenda.
protective and curating your own experience, or are you trying to say that your own experience is universal?
Yeah, and yeah, I don't know, and I'm really curious about this subject because I feel like our brains kind of protect ourselves from realizing, like maybe timelines that are inevitable. So our brains kind of change in order to prepare us for that. And I've always wondered about why and how. Like, why do our brains create these narratives that everyone goes through with cooking, movies, music, family, to soften the blow of the inevitable? And I think it's a self-defense mechanism, sort of like every organism has a degree of self-defense. And I don't know why our brains change that way, but there must be a purpose because they all do.
And there's got to be something to the reason that everyone thinks the coolest shit in the world is the music or the pop culture or the athletes or the movies that they experienced and enjoyed when they were in high school.
Yeah.
There just has to be something in the brain chemistry of going from a child to an adult that makes it so fertile for implanting our ideas of greatness.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the moment where rookies were older than I was. And that was kind of a shock to me, to realize I wasn't going to be a starting shortstop of the Yankees. There was just no chance anymore, And there is... I mean,
Don't give up. If there's one
Right,
thing
right.
we've learned, it's that you got to want it.
right. I mean, there are certain fields that, like, are more forgivable, like writing, art, but being a lawyer is not. Being a politician is hard, even though we're looking at the barrel of the gun and an 80-year-old president, win or lose. But I think there's I overuse this word, but it's a core. There's a melancholy to follow like a young man like Zion Williamson, because I remember tweeting about Zion in high school, being like, I hope the Knicks get this guy, and now he's an adult in the NBA. I'm like, where did that go? Where did those years go?
Isn't he like 18?
I mean, he can vote, right? Like but he's not 15. Like he goes, and that's the confusion, because he might sit down with us and be like, "Yo, I grew up listening to 6ix9ine." Be like, "How's that possible? 6ix9ine's only been around 3 years." It's like, "Well, I was 15 3 years ago." I'm like, "Fair enough, sir." Now dunk this basketball.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the march of time. You were so present today, man. You
It's like-
were here.
It's like I absorbed 10 hours of something.
Like
Sporadically
you
for
were a
5 weeks.
human goop lab in the flesh today.
Should we just go into The Last Dance, man? Or you want to talk? Should we talk about? Let's talk about some pizza before we go into The Last
Yeah,
Dance.
since pizza's on the mind.
This lead is ridiculous, but
This
we're
is
going,
one of your
baby.
greatest segues I've experienced.
It was lit. Money.
So it's floating around on Twitter a little bit today that restaurants such as Chuck E. Cheese and Applebee's are making their products, in this case pizza and, I don't know, jalapeno poppers or something, available via delivery, except under pseudonyms. So I believe Applebee's was calling itself Neighborhood Wings, and Chuck E. Cheese was calling itself like Pascali's or something, which is apparently the chef in the animatronic band.
Oh.
Is this ethical?
I think it's great. I'm all for it.
It's fantastic. It's the best.
I mean, artists do this all the time. Athletes change teams. Like, whatever. I refuse to be outraged by this.
Are you sure? Can you muster some outrage?
Let's see. My first take would be like, hey, if I see the picture and they're jalapeno poppers, like, I know what I'm getting, right? Like, if I look at the pizza and I'm like, wait, this is similar to Chuck E. Cheese, like, am I that mad? Like, you showed me the picture of the pizza, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's outraged. To me, it's more humorous that national, seemingly successful, but national powerhouse companies that we all know that have name brands that are decades old are hiding their identity in order to sell the very products that they make. That to me is interesting. Is it because they are known as making bad food, or is it an attempt to seem local? You know, because maybe there's this idea that if you're going to order food, why would you order it from, well, obviously, why would you order a pizza from Chuck E. Cheese? Like, that's bizarre. People don't do that. They're not accustomed to doing it, nor would you, if looking at the options for pizza delivery, say Chuck E. Cheese. That's a place that I'd like to eat at home. But Applebee's is weirder. It's like, wouldn't you think that people would be more prone to ordering Applebee's by its name brand than an anonymous name?
Well, they have two shots now, right? Because they have both.
I guess that's true, right? You can do both, and it's no effort at all.
Yeah. It doesn't require any sort of infrastructure except maybe a logo and setting up another account through whatever platform.
So fair point.
And yeah, I wonder what the rules. I wonder what owners of those franchises are allowed to do. Just doing quick research. It seems like Chuck E. Cheese is not like totally solid, and it says Chuck E. Cheese parent company forms restructuring committee because of the coronavirus. And is Chuck E. Cheese too big to fail? Is your question?
No, nothing is too big to fail. Or very few things, especially ones that are involved with scores of children going and running around in an enclosed space with their parents
Exactly.
standing around,
I
and
think
shifting
you're
to a
done.
model of, our bad pizza? How about
Yeah.
that at home? Like,
Have you
I
had
get
Chuck E. Cheese
what
pizza?
they're doing. I mean, I like at a birthday party when I was a child.
Oh, I'm so jealous. So you've been to a Chuck E. Cheese?
Oh, yeah. My recollection of Chuck E. Cheese is basically that there was the guy in the rat suit, Chuck,
I love him. He's great.
Charles E. Cheese.
The round mound of pizza bound. I don't know.
Then there were like ball crawls, there were things like that. But mostly it was an arcade with tables that you would sit at with your group and eat cake and pizza. But yeah, it was tokens. You'd walk around, you'd play Centipede or whatever the video games of the moment were. Miss Pac-Man.
You're really dating yourself. No Street Fighter. No Simpsons. A 4-player mashup.
I mean, I haven't been there since I was like a tiny dude.
They weren't around where I grew up, but they eventually made here. Would adults are not allowed to go in without a kid, right? Like
That's what I'm saying. I have no idea. I have not been to them since I was like in like a toddler, basically.
I gotta be honest. As an adult, I'm kind of into it, and as a kid, it would blow my mind if I had like a 10-year-old or 7-year-old, and I was like, "We're going to Chuck E. Cheese today, buddy." He'd be like, he'd lose his damn mind, right?
Well, they have versions of them that are more high end here in the city. I went to one for like a family member before, and it's the exact same model, just without the shtick and the kind of brand recognizability that makes you cloak
Yeah, yeah.
your brand when you're trying to sell pizza, but it was exactly the same thing. There was even pizza, and there's an arcade, and there's another room where someone comes in and leads the kids in a group drawing exercise and makes some balloon animals. Exact same business model,
Yeah.
but for like Manhattan parents.
I mean, back to the rebranding thing. Like, have you been scrolling through Netflix and like every week do you notice that they change the image for the same shows? It's the same stuff, right? I'll click on something and be like, oh, whoa, this looks like a hostage movie. I'm definitely watching this. And I'm like, oh, I've seen this. They just switched the image, so I didn't recognize it, you know? And I think about Dunkin' Donuts, that they won all those awards because they were in danger, and they rebranded as a coffee business and just called it Dunkin', and now they're more popular than ever. And it seems like they're too big to fail, but you see companies like Blockbuster not adapting and then failing.
This scheme is really common in nightlife.
Yeah, that's true.
Not only do you have places that just rename the same space with, minor tinkering inside, from an ownership standpoint, like that happens all the time. Whatever that place is on McDougal Street, Love, I've been to like 5 permutations of that place that has the cave inside and the weird dripping water.
Oh my God, we've been going there for like 2 decades, man.
That's what I mean.
La Caverna.
Yeah, and it was also Love and like probably 2 or 3 other things.
I've DJ'd at every incarnation of that thing.
Exactly. So even
Same
when
shit.
even before a place would change its name, but they'd be dwindling in popularity, or there'd be a stigma, or they're just played out.
Yeah.
Promoters would name a party something and like write the address down.
That's
Like,
right. Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
82 McDougal. That sounds awfully familiar, man. 82 McDougal. Because of course we only think of locations by cross streets for the most part.
Yeah, for sure.
You're like 82 McDougal. Well, maybe I'll check it out.
Yeah.
There is free Red Stripe.
The Office London will be doing 3 songs there. At midnight.
Oh, I'm at Caverna.
Yeah. Well, it's like watching the Oklahoma City Thunder and being like, "That's Nick Collison. Well, that's Kevin Durant. Wait a second, these are the Seattle Supersonics." So I'm not mad. I mean, a lot of the switchover happens because of like necessity. Rarely does it happen because people feel like it. Because a brand, the brand is strong. You want it. You want the brand to do the work for you, and when it stops working, people change. So I don't like the feeling when I'm being tricked. But for example, Chuck E. Cheese, all it takes is a quick Google and be like, "Oh, they're going to be out of business in a year because no one will be able to go there."
Well, on one hand, if you have a justifiably terrible reputation for making a bad product.
Is
and
it bad though? I just want to make sure.
Chuck E. Cheese makes bad pizza. Absolutely.
Could we get some quick rundown? Do you think Domino's is good?
No.
I think it's pretty good. Little Caesars?
I would go with no. I don't think any of those chains are particularly good. But Chuck E. Cheese is known for not being good. Like that is their reputation, that they make bad pizza. Because no one goes there for that. Yeah. So for them trying to say, well, we've got a kitchen, we can make pizza, we have some employees, that PPP hit, let's try to get some pizzas out and sell them. Understandable.
Yeah.
But it is revealing when you say our brand name is so ass, it tastes like ass when you speak it, that we have to rely on a fully anonymous non-entity to try to trick people into buying our bad pizza. That is kind of dishonest.
I mean, yeah, I
You
get
know our
that.
pizza that sucks? We're going to try to pass it off under a different name.
I have no problems with it, but I see your point. I think, what can you expect from, what are they called now? Like Chuck E. Joe's? I don't like.
I just feel that a
With no
dishonest
ratings.
rat. What will we see next? I'm sorry. What were you saying?
Is a rat honest? A rat is too honest, right? Rats are associated with telling like the unfortunate truth, right? I've never thought about this until now.
Wow, Now you're pro snitch. Incredible.
No, I'm just calling a spade because Michael Jordan is a rat, but a lot of people would call him telling the truth, right? It's like, why would you air out that dirty laundry? He's like, it's the truth. I'm like, you're a snitch / rat.
It's a fine line. Depends on who you ask.
Right. So like this switching of pizza is so subjective because I bet you there's kids who just think Chuck E. Cheese pizza is fine. And
But they're not in control of the seamless Grubhub switch.
But aren't they? Like if my kid was acting
But
up,
no, you would never order it, is what I'm saying. No
But-
parent would say, hey, do you want some Chuck E. Cheese pizza? Let's order it. Like, no one would do that because they
I
have to
might
eat
do
it too.
that. Oh, I might do that though. If I know my kid lights up with this pizza, I'll be like, they can have it, man.
We got to get you some Chuck E. Cheese pizza so you can make a more informed
True.
discussion. I've got 5 guys who are going to deliver it over to you.
But mysteriously, and we'll never mention those 5 guys again because we can't find them at all. Not even with a phone call that would take 4 hours to find out who these 5 guys are.
Impossible to find them.
I'll accuse them of poisoning somebody, but not get to the bottom of anything.
So you're saying this is virtually, for all purposes, attempted murder. Absolutely. Would
Right.
you like to call the restaurant and find out who they were? Oh, no. No. It's an unsolvable crime. It's a cold case.
It is legit assault. But we're not going to really discuss this further because someone wanted it more than they did.
I don't know. I called them up. I asked for the chicken tartare pizza. That chicken tartare slice just hits different.
What could go wrong with raw eggs in the middle of your pizza?
Obviously we're talking about The Last Dance and Michael Jordan's tale about the flu game, or his revelation. But the flu game was actually the food poisoning game, and he said that he ordered pizza and ate it by himself over the sink in his hotel room before a finals game in Utah.
Let's get this straight. He ordered it and ate it in his bathroom. And sort of like canned fish sandwiches. You're in the vicinity, a lot of particles going on. And now that we're all particle experts, we know what happened. Poo, baby.
I mean, is this a poo issue?
I mean, in more ways than one, probably. Did he just want to steal Paul Pierce's thunder? Paul Pierce became a beloved, famous person for pooping his pants during a game. And now Michael Jordan's like, I invented this shit.
I know. Paul Pierce came up with the whole, pee yourself challenge far before TikTok. But
This is all true.
What are we saying here about Michael Jordan's pizza tale? Are we saying that, A, he was just hungover, B, that it was food poisoning, C, that it was intentionally given to him, that in fact workers at a hotel tried to poison him in order to help the Utah Jazz, or workers from the pizzeria, one of the two? What are we exactly supposed to take away from this? That people tried to poison Michael Jordan? If so, how do you poison someone and give them food poisoning? How do you do it?
Poo pizza, baby.
But would that even work? I don't know. I
don't know.
I've never put poo on a pie and passed it off to a NBA MVP. But
It's
would
a
that
real
even work?
PPP. I don't know. There's so little information that was given to us, and immediately made me think of conspiracy theories, and we might be in. Conspiracy theories have been in their golden age since JFK and UFOs, and which are true. And I think I am actively trying to be aware of the things I believe that are just not true. For example, Michael Jordan was hungover, or he had.
And how would anyone know this pizza itself was for Michael
Right.
Jordan? If
I
you
mean-
called out of your hotel room to a local pizzeria and said, hey, I'd like a pie at 3 a.m., why would you assume it was Michael Jordan?
Right.
Unless
And-
you said it's for Michael Jordan, which would be something you would never do if you were on the road during the finals at 3 a.m. You would just never divulge that information ever. You would never give your real name. You'd never give your room number. You'd never give your hotel, even if people knew the team was staying there.
I mean,
You'd
people
never
could
s-
find out in a a small town.
People- People
it's
could
not
definitely
hard.
find out what hotel the Bulls are staying at.
Yeah.
But a pizza going to that hotel, why would you think at 3 a.m. was for Michael Jordan?
I mean, I think that part is more believable to me. The unbelievable part before last night was I was like, he just had the flu because he said he had the flu. We have no other information. We know that he skips. He went to Atlantic City to party with his dad before Knicks playoff game. So the flu game being a hungover game is a possibility. But I was like, I cannot do this conspiracy theory. If he says he has the flu, he has the flu. And then last night, and in order to rid yourself of conspiracy theories, which we all believe in one way or another, is just to look at reputable sources and sources that can always be changed and have checks and balances to them. And if Jordan says he had the flu and other people in his camp say he had the flu, fine, he had the flu, he wasn't hungover. But then last night it turns out he had pizza poisoning, which is the first time I've heard this, and it was leaked a few hours before the documentary. So his original story wasn't correct, and now I don't know what to believe, man.
This has happened a couple times where he has maintained something for 20 years and then the documentary allegedly tells us the truth and it doesn't change anything. It's just a different version that makes you question why we had the previous one.
Yeah.
Oh, it was pizza. Why didn't you say that in the first place if that was in fact true? I never said the thing about Republicans. Well, yeah, I did, but I said it on a bus. It was a joke. Why didn't you say that?
Yeah.
And I think there was another one. There's been, when he said, I wasn't around to I didn't say that Isaiah couldn't be on the dream team.
Right.
And he's taken responsibility for that in the past. I don't understand why his story is changing 20 years later.
I mean,
for no benefit.
It doesn't ingratiate him to a better story. And the takeaway I had with the pizza story was, why is he eating pizza the night before a game? And 10 minutes later in the documentary, he's his favorite dude in the world making fun of Scott Burrell for eating poorly. I'm like, maybe this guy doesn't want it enough. Maybe if he ate well and wasn't gambling all the time, he could have won 7 championships.
Very true. However, though, you got to remember, NBA guys eating at 3 a.m. Wasn't the game probably a 7 o'clock tip off?
Hey man, I don't touch carbs before I record a night before I record cookies, even if it's late. No, it's fine. But
But I'm saying we know that NBA players live on a different schedule because you don't really want to be up at 8 in the morning.
No.
And then playing basketball, 12 hours later.
Yeah. I was just surprised that he revealed the information that he eats like Charles Barkley, because he's so concerned with his image. I'm surprised he was he wasn't I ordered a salad and something was up with the salad. But the pizza thing was the most interesting part of the finale of The Last Dance, which was hilarious. It's we're making pizza jokes now. I love this.
Well, it sounds like we're talking about The Last Dance.
We have been talking about The Last Dance.
That's what it sounds like. Well, here we are.
Yeah.
It's over.
Yeah.
It's over. 10 hours, 10 episodes, 5 weeks. The Last Dance. Michael Jordan's story, as told to Michael Jordan by Michael Jordan. The FUBU of Michael Jordan documentaries.
That's what they say.
All right, what's our conclusion? We discussed last episode how he needed to bring this home by wanting it more, strapping on his distressed clutch jeans. Did he do it? Did he want it enough?
It's so appropriate that it ended today and that we're talking about it because it feels like we have a vaccine for boomers now. We've reached apex boomer and we made it, man. I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. We're going to have fewer conversations about wanting it more and about counting rings because after 10 hours, your defense has been stated. And you missed, baby. I said baby 3 times already this pod.
It's incredible. And that's the kind of thing that our Patreon subscribers should get used to. It's a brand new world over here on Patreon.
Yeah, swag.
Hell yeah. So let's go back to what you were just saying. This idea that it's almost like in a courtroom, to your point, like asked and answered. Like boomers want to bring up, yeah, but MJ, hey, dude, asked and answered. We've been through this. You've stated your case. You got 10 hours and we all watched it. We listened to your shit for 10 hours about how MJ is the best. We listened to it. I don't want to hear you bring up, yeah, but handshake. No. We've covered that.
Yeah.
But again, when you say they missed, that they bricked it, they heaved up a humiliating airball. Was this ineffective? Not to you, but overall.
I think it was effective, and I think this is the peak. We're at peak boomer NBA right now. People are hyped. People who enjoy Rakim and the boom bap are riding high right now. But you know, there's dissipating kind of effects of this, and I don't know about you, but I noticed a drop off of chatter on my Twitter feed about the later episodes. It was kind of at a fever pitch when it started, and now everyone's like, we're really grateful we got that. What else are we talking about?
I felt as if it was very dominant on the, much like Tony Kukoc in his prime, during the nights when it was on. That it seemed to really take over the feed on Sunday nights. It may not have had the same week-long effect that some of the earlier ones did. And was, look, basketball media seized on this and viewed it as a phenomenon. So you'd go on Instagram, and whether it was ESPN or any other outlet, they were all just churning out, you know, MJ content, much like the interns have been doing on the Cookies socials.
That's cool.
But I thought it was really popular. And I don't think that was the issue. But the tone of discussion did change. And I think they did a shrewd move saying early on that, MJ's worried about how he's going to come off.
Yeah.
And obscuring the fact that this was Michael Jordan's production.
Yeah. Yes. That was entirely tactical.
But they couldn't really camouflage it for that long. After a couple episodes, it became very clear what this was. Mm-hmm. And I sort of agree with one idea that, hey, this is just the story you've been told all along, and we're doing it again. And let's enjoy it. I get all that. But it's propaganda. Mm-hmm. It's not the full story. It's not really true. It wasn't revealing things. It was omitting stuff. It's kind of crazy that this exists in this format.
Yeah. It's really interesting that you brought up time and the way time goes slow and fast, because when I think back to this documentary, 10 hours seems like enough time to talk about all the things we've been wanting them to talk about. But then I think that it's not enough time. It went by so fast, and it was just propaganda, and it was a sizzle reel, and I think it's supposed to make you euphoric. And if you like Jordan already, this was it, man. This was like a Hall of Fame speech. It really buoyed your feelings of what you had about regarding Michael Jordan. But, you know, all the things I want them to discuss, like race, family, getting older, I'm like, 10 hours is not enough. This needs to almost be like a season, like of a show. It needs to be like 16 episodes throughout the fall.
Look, fundamentally, they did not challenge Michael Jordan. They didn't challenge him with questions. They didn't challenge him to justify who he was outside of this sort of snake eating its own tail element of, I wanted to be great, so I won, and I wanted to win, so I was great. And this just sort of endless cycle of greatness and winning that defined his entire life without there being, it was just this kind of opaque ring of winning, greatness, the best. And it never really broke. It never was threatened even in his, you know, they could have lost the Jazz, but they didn't. It was never really in doubt. That's kind of the whole takeaway, was that, oh yeah, we could have lost the Pacers. It was close. But, you know, it was never really in doubt, because then we would have had to concede that someone was almost on Michael Jordan's level. that the Pacers were almost as good as them, that
Yeah.
the Jazz were almost as good as them. And if a shot had bounced the other direction, MJ would have lost, and this entire mythos would be in tatters.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a mechanical flaw with this documentary if it does serve as propaganda, because we don't consider John Stockton, Karl Malone, Reggie Miller on Michael Jordan's level. There was no LeBron James element to this where the two greats saw each other in these games. We don't consider John Stockton as a challenger to Michael Jordan's throne. But what choice does this documentary have except to talk about what actually happened?
They were painted into a corner a bit by the structure. And I don't know that, I'm not a filmmaker. Maybe it was too difficult to flip it up for the last couple episodes. But it was very challenging as a viewer to go from watching them describing the 1997 finals against the Jazz while also flipping back and forth with the 1998 playoffs against the Pacers, which at that point was kind of being buoyed as more of a threat and more important because it was in the present, so to speak, with the knowledge that they were just going to play the Jazz again after this. And you had this sort of triangle where every part of it devalued the other part. That the finals victory didn't really matter because we were going to see them play this same team again anyhow. And the Pacers stuff didn't matter because it was earlier in the playoffs than either of the other parts against the Jazz. And we had them playing 12, 13 games against the Jazz. There was so much Jazz stuff. But they also didn't really feel like a mega boss. They didn't feel like a
final boss, no.
guy to beat. And it didn't come off like that. They just came off as a good team who lost twice. And, Malone comes in and like, you got me.
Yeah. It was so vague. They painted the picture of the second matchup as the Jazz lost the first matchup and came back better than ever and were ready. And I'm like, is that it? And we got we got so much Reggie Miller, to your point about the Pacers, and that was a great team. And Steve Kerr, and it almost felt like a TNT production. Because Reggie Miller, I'm a fan of Reggie Miller's personality post-NBA. I think he's entertaining and smart, and I love listening to him talk about the game. And Steve Kerr, obviously, is one of the most thoughtful guys in the league right now, and the coach of the team that Michael Jordan is threatened by, one of the teams that he's threatened by. And to hear them talk, it almost was as if Jordan was saying, like, if these people talk highly of me, then I have won over this generation or this generation's thinkers. And only because Reggie Miller is a successful broadcaster now. And we don't get any Jazz stuff because no one has had that personality since. But, like, I remember when the Jazz Bulls matchups were happening, it was so much about race, right? Chicago versus Utah. Like, Utah felt like enemy territory.
Dennis Rodman was reviled, remember? He said shit about Utah.
Yeah. Watching games in Utah felt like a different planet to me in New York. I was like, what's happening in Salt Lake City? What is that city all about? Why is everyone white? And it was, even as a young man, I was very aware that series had some tension beyond basketball.
I agree. And just to backtrack to one of your points before, when they said the Jazz were back and they're better than ever. Well, they weren't. Right. I mean, they were a great team. They were awesome. Both those Jazz teams were squads, best offense in the NBA. But the evidence that they were back and better than before just isn't true. In 98, they won 62 games. The previous year, they won 64. Like, they weren't as good. Their record wasn't as good. Their net rating wasn't as good. I don't mind the argument, just to say it. But, like, they're back and they're better than ever. No, they're actually 2 games worse.
Right.
You beat the exact same team.
It's a Donald Trump rally. It's like, we could fact check this because we all have computers. But it's happening so fast in real time. And if you're into Jordan already, you're just like, you're just bathing in this narrative of like the Jazz were better and he beat them again.
Did Karl Malone refuse to sit for an interview, or did they not want him a part of it? Because since that era, we now know that he's been involved with like ugly activities and is someone that you kind of don't want around the NBA or around your production. And if that's the case, it did diminish both of those series, because not hearing from Malone, he was just, you only saw the clips of him sort of in games, like, you know, doing like hammer dunks off pick and rolls or like little fadeaways, but you never heard from him. I don't know. I don't think the Jazz were set up properly as being his toughest foe ever, which, you know, for the sake of this show, they had to be the second version of the Pistons. It was the Knicks, the Pistons, and the Pacers almost got more props because they've got
Miller's
ESPN
famous.
and they have ESPN guys. They have Jalen and Reggie, who are great on camera and funny and willing to chat, and they have great access to those dudes. They don't just have an afternoon with Stockton or something. They can get Jalen or Reggie in a studio at any point.
Yeah. And yeah, right. I wanted to hear from Byron Russell. Like, if you're going to talk trash about this rookie who is acting like Michael Jordan, like he hates the people who act like him, and when he challenged him pre-game, you know, being like, I'm going to be on you this game, like that's such a Jordan-esque thing to say, but not to hear from these players that are still stuck in his memory, like Byron Russell. I think he talked trash.
It was funny to hear Stockton kind of roll his eyes at that anecdote.
Yeah.
Where they're like, you know, Russell was a kid. He was just out there cracking jokes. And he's like, MJ would have just come up with some other shit that he like pretended to be offended by or to inspire him or motivate him, whatever.
Yeah.
Like he basically was just like, whatever.
Yeah, he's sort of like I am. He's fueled by spite. And but I wanted more people to talk, and we saw a dwindling of the reporters, like the analysts. Like Wilbon doesn't make an appearance. I think Aldridge pops up. I wanted to hear another perspective on it, just to give it more color. And the omission of LeBron James, I felt like, was hilarious. But anybody of this generation would have been. I mean, we got Joe Mantegna, you know, like. Can we get somebody to put it into context? I mean, I love Joe Mantegna. Come on. But it was lacking the same things it was lacking in the previous 8 episodes.
So this is an issue, though, because I would love to see guys like Bomani and Pablo and Jacoby talking about the context.
Dan Le Batard.
Exactly. Yeah. That ESPN has Mina Kimes. They have tons of talent. Yeah. Who could do an incredible job describing and narrating some of these ideas and events in a more modern context. Just sort of what we've been vaguely doing right now. We got Phil Jackson on a chalkboard saying, you know, the Jazz, they're going to look for easy layups. It mentions that they score the second most points in the NBA. But we didn't really get someone saying, okay, here's the deal with the Jazz. Here's what they did. Here's how they got here. They were the best offensive team in the league. They were a fantastic offensive team. And like the approach to beating them was this. Here was their record. Like we rarely even got any context of how good the opponents were. Suns with Barkley led the league in offense. We didn't get that. We didn't get it. The Knicks, best defense by a mile. We didn't really learn, if you were a viewer, this is why these teams score 72 points a game. It just happened. You're like, wait, what the fuck? Why am I watching a game that went to double overtime and they scored 96 points? What just happened here?
And let's say they hate nerds and they don't want numbers. Fine. Tell me how you broke Patrick Ewing's heart forever. Like, let's get into this. Tell us what happened. You just ended Utah basketball completely. Like, I'm interested in this stuff too. It doesn't have to be statistics, which we love, but like show us why you ended New York basketball.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not arguing that they need to go out there and say they had the best offensive rating. You just need someone to say, the Jazz were the best offensive team in basketball. For 3 years straight, they had mastered a pick and roll offense with Stockton and Malone. They had shooters. They were very tough to defend. And just a little color, build
Yeah.
these guys up. I mean, this is not new stuff, but the Pacers series, that Pacers team was really, really good. They were not scrubs at all, and they were not presented as such. Reggie Miller was great. They had fantastic shooting. Larry Bird's terrible coaching is probably the only reason they didn't win a title. Dude, they shot 39% from three. That's hot. And this was with the line moved back that season. They should have beaten the Bulls. That Pacers team was gnarly.
Yeah, and they had three big men that still give me nightmares being a Knicks fan. Rick Smits and the Twin Towers, Antonio Davis and Dale Davis. And they were perfectly built. Shout out to Donnie Walsh, who a Knicks legend, who was the architect of the only good Knicks season. But this Pacers team was no joke, and I thought they were on the way to a championship for sure.
So that Pacers team won 58 games, which was a couple behind the Bulls, but more or less the same. Both fantastic elite teams in the East. They were fourth in offensive rating, fifth in defensive rating. That's the recipe for a title winner. Top five on both sides of the ball. They were great. You had Chris Mullin, you had Reggie Miller, you had outside shooting that was almost Golden State-esque for that era.
But you know what's interesting?
And then you had-
27th ranked in pace.
That's what I'm saying. Poorly coached.
Yo, yes.
They took 12 threes. They
Yeah.
shot 39% from three, which is higher than any team in the current NBA, and took 12 and a half threes a game. They made like five.
You would think
with
that.
Reggie Miller and Chris Mullin and Larry Bird as the coach.
Well, I was gonna say you would think having a coach who was a good 3-point shooter would help them, but they hired one that wasn't a good 3-point shooter, so he doesn't know what it feels like to drain buckets.
I mean, that team had Fred Hoiberg and a Jalen Rose.
Austin Crozier was a presence.
He was very present.
I mean, not great, but Mark Jackson was like a big part of that team.
Dale
He had
Davis, just a squad. They were a squad.
Mark Jackson had a 3.1 BPM too during the regular season. He was a good player at age 32, man.
Anyway, Larry Bird let down Indiana.
Yeah, they say he cursed Indiana basketball.
Yeah, what did they call him? Like the Satan of French Lick?
The Larry
Scourge,
Curse.
the scourge of French Lick.
There goes Larry Curse.
But yes,
Yeah.
I think you needed to flesh out your enemies a little bit more throughout, especially when you beat the same team twice. It's like double the payoff.
Okay.
You've already established Malone, bad guy. Stockton, bad guy. Hornacek, bad guy. I think it was missing those voices. So at the same time, I don't know how you contextualize it for right now without time stamping it to right now. As in, if Pablo Torre's up there and he says, so Reggie Miller was Steph Curry before Steph Curry, or Klay Thompson before Klay
Yeah.
Thompson.
Anything. Yeah, that would have helped.
It would help. But then
Yeah.
again, if you watch this documentary in 10 years, it'll just be naming another old guy. You know what I mean? Like for
Yeah.
posterity, you almost have to ground everything with all the voices and all the clips and everybody talking about 1998, as much as it annoys me to acknowledge that.
I accept these terms. I accept that we won't know about his family, done. I accept that his father is a sore spot. Let's not talk about it. And I accept the proposition being we are going to create a time capsule and only talk to people who are in that time, which is fine. And earlier this week, I saw the KD documentary, Basketball County in the Water. And it was about PG County, and it was about how inexplicably many pros from this area in Maryland have grown up there. And we're talking about Kevin Durant being the most famous, but Victor Oladipo, Nolan Smith, Beast Mode, Quinn Cook, Steve Francis, Jeff Green, Jeremy Grant. Like, that's a lot of NBA talent from one area. And they did a really nice job really quickly. It was like a 45, 50 minute. It was a quick documentary, maybe longer, but it was not, it didn't have the budget and the firepower that The Last Dance had, obviously. But it painted a really compelling picture because it let these guys talk. And there was a multitude of voices and a multitude of experiences. And we got to know about how Victor Oladipo is motivated, and it turns out it's his family. We got to know how Jeremy Grant feels about his friends. I didn't know Nolan Smith and Michael Beasley were best friends who were competitive because they were ranked 1 and 2 in high school. Like, all of that is really interesting, and we know what happens after that. And all of that stuff was missing in the Jordan doc, even with the terms that we agreed to, that we're not going to get contemporary voices or a back history. Jordan is not compelling enough as a talking head to hold this whole documentary up. He cannot prop this documentary up because he has thoughts of a young man.
He also can't be the narrator of his own story and making it convincingly not his own story.
Right.
Because he's not honest. And
Which is fun too. But
he doesn't want
right.
this to be the Michael Jordan story as told by Michael Jordan. He wants to behave as if it is an objective document, where he can say, "Yeah, watch that. You know, maybe I revealed a little more than I should have, but you know, it's the story." But he didn't want to actually narrate it.
And
I would have been interested in that too. Like, my overall thing has kind of stayed the same on this. Once we knew what this was and what the parameters were, there were some fascinating parts of it that weren't intended. And I think, Jordan couldn't be trusted to tell this story because he's only frank when he shits on people. But I would have loved to have it narrated by him where he just shits on people and it shows that side of him even more.
he really lights up when he talks about Scott Burrell. He talks about like working hard. He's like, that's what I do. Oh, but let me get going about Scott Burrell. I mean, this guy was a bum, and so we got the knockout punch in these. I believe in episode 10, we kind of got to see where the filmmakers were going with
this.
They
cut to the hands 3 times.
Right. And it turns out their premise was Michael Jordan's greatness, literally they said, isn't because he's taller and better at basketball. It's because he was in the present. And this is a very Phil Jackson idea. And this kind of alludes to a state of mind, a higher state of mind. And we've gone through years and years of developing self-care and a sort of religion around that. And I say that in a positive sense. I'm a fan of people creating religions. And I think that was a surprise to me because he has been a man, and I don't want to sound like we're dogging him too much because I don't live in the present. I don't know many of my most beloved circle, like my circle of friends and family. I wouldn't say one of them actually lives in the present that much in a holistic sense. So to say Jordan does, I immediately question that. And he has been so hung up on spite and recreating his own legacy in that time that he has not been present in this documentary in 2020 for a minute.
Yeah, it was a very curious term. It felt as if the guy said it and had been introduced to it by, therapy, said it about Michael Jordan, and the filmmaker's ears perked up and like, that's it. That's it. It's that he's present, that he's here. It's wellness. His energy was healed. We need to read his aura. Mm-hmm. It felt like a modern idea transposed over this entire story. Honestly, it was kind of jarring. I was like, wait, what? Did they just say that? Yeah. It really did strike me as straight psychobabble being applied to Michael fucking Jordan, the guy who is fundamentally dishonest at all times.
Yes. And when you read or talk to somebody about living in the moment or being present, it talks about like being goal oriented and canceling out all the noise that prevents you from achieving your goal, whether that be success in business, in happy in your family, or just being happy. It means don't consider the distractions that take you off the path to this goal. And it's really easy to apply that in sports terms because we put rose-colored lenses on this, and it reminds me of Friday Night Lights, right? Clear eyes, full hearts. Like, it doesn't really mean anything. When you win, you can say it. If you lose, what do clear eyes and full hearts get you? Like, an experience. And I think that's a really profound thing. Jordan was so hearing him talk about being upset that Karl Malone won the MVP over him and then saying he's in the present is contradictory.
The other thing is that the fragility of Michael Jordan, the ultimate winner, is so reliant on things that are kind of out of his control, but they have to pretend they're under his control. You know, Steve Kerr made that shot. Not Michael Jordan, but Michael Jordan found him open and trusted him. So, like, it has to come back to Michael Jordan. He just made a basketball play. Like, that's what you do. He's playing basketball. He made the right pass, and Kerr knocked down a 12-footer. Great. Like, big shot. It's also an open 12-footer. Not to take anything away from it, but yeah, sure. But you also still have to credit Jordan with that, because if Steve Kerr misses that shot and then they lose that game and he loses to the Jazz, his entire story doesn't work by no fault of his own. And that's kind of an issue here with this kind of discussion, that if someone makes a shot at some point on another team, if Charles Smith, finishes better, that doesn't really matter because that's when he was out of the league. But you know what I'm saying? Like, there are so many moving parts in the outcomes of a basketball game that you can't really believe this idea that one man was able to win all these close games. It just doesn't stack up to our knowledge of how basketball works and how probability works and luck works. And it has to become mysticism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's magical thinking. And I'm in for this. Like, I love these kinds of stories, but they didn't do this kind of story good, right? Like, okay, 10 hours, make Michael Jordan superhuman to me. Let's go. It didn't quite work out that way because, first of all, he's flawed, which makes him interesting. But if you vacillate in between ultimate golden greatness and being a flawed hero, you're just kind of in the middle of nothing, right?
It's what we've been saying, that the story is just about winning, and it's not about him.
Right.
They've taken Michael Jordan and minimized him as a basketball player in order to elevate him as a winner, which is just not that convincing when you have to tell people how John Paxson hit a shot and Kerr hit a shot and, an opponent missed a shot. And you're like, well, tell me why he was so good. Tell me what he did. Tell me why they were in that position that Steve Kerr could make, a 12-footer and they could win. Don't hang the winning and losing as the ultimate judge of how great Michael Jordan is. But that's the argument he's been trotting out for 20 years.
Yeah, and this
better than Kobe, more rings. Better than LeBron, more rings. That's his thing.
No mention of the BMM Bill Russell teams, which was fascinating to me because they have more rings. And, and this is like a filmmaking issue because you don't have to have Karl Malone on there, but you can show us in 20 seconds with good editing who Karl Malone was. And he's a very decorated NBA player. But unfortunately, what we saw was him banking in 5-foot jumpers with no hand in his face. And to a person who has watched the Warriors of LeBron James play, Karl Malone does not look that dangerous. So beating him, and John Stockton has short shorts, and he's been a joke for his shorts, and he's small and white, so he's not convincing. all you need is 40 seconds combined to show us how great these two players were. No mention that they were two of the greatest players in NBA history and the top 50 list. You know?
Jordan's reluctance to credit anyone with being great, let alone close to his level, it makes us not respect the people he beat or the teams that he beat.
Right. You would be upset at a game if your final boss was weak. In order to have a good game and buy the sequel to that game, the final boss has to be a challenge. Of course, it has to be reasonably beatable as well. You don't want to keep losing the game. But
I mean, they had to have 12 games. They had to show us 12 games against the Jazz.
yeah,
Fucking Jazz?
no.
12 games? And
Yeah.
they didn't have any way around that unless they were just going to blow off 97.
Yeah. Byron
They-
Russell
they-
was
they-
not an issue. Like, creating him into a nemesis, a rival, was just pulling stuff out of the air. Byron Russell was not a problem.
To me, setting up the Jazz and having people talk about them and how great they were, and that's where you use like hilarious, like Shook One's instrumental as like the Jazz come out in the same way that you did with the Spurs, like, you know, Tragedy Gaddafi, Blood Type drops, Kimono Noriega, Bloody Money Part 2 as Jeff Hornacek strolls out aside Greg Ostertag. Like, that would have been amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, make them the ultimate bad guys. Like, can the poor Bulls who are injured and old and tired, can they beat like the biggest badasses the NBA had ever seen? The 1997 Utah Jazz.
It's funny, even the soundtrack got shook, no pun intended.
Ooh, quoted.
Swag. So- but there was no rap in it for 2 hours, and
Kenny Lattimore unreleased deep cuts.
I know, just jamming out. And we got some Pearl Jam at the end that reflected the whole living in the present home run shot that they were looking for. And we found out that they were working on these last two episodes as they were screening the first 8. And people had seen the first 8 who had downloaded it. But these two were being cut last month. And it seemed apologetic. It seemed like they were aware of the criticism, maybe. And, you know, even though people lauded the soundtrack, I looked at the people who were like, best soundtrack ever. Pearl Jam really, really brought it home. And it was like Gary, John, you know, like Phil. And I'm like, oh, this is a certain audience that loves Pearl Jam. Not to generalize Pearl Jam fans, because I find Pearl Jam to be a threat in my life right now, because as I get older and the more they're around, I find them more and more acceptable, maybe even easy to listen to. I used to be enraged by them, but now I'm like, ooh, cool, Vedder sounds good about now. I just wish my life was back to normal. And so I find them to be an existential threat in my entertainment life. But I think these last two episodes, and, you know, we are not the base audience for this, but it didn't bring it home, man.
Yeah, I think showing Howard Isley and Jacques Vaughn in slow motion, like Tarantino style, as Nas and Mobb Deep, It's Yours drops. Flames.
Yeah, I mean, there's a beauty to basketball's a beautiful game. Let's do this. Like, I've been rewatching Friday Night Lights, and Peter Berg, even though he's like he loves war in a way that is uncomfortable, the first movie was like truly beautiful, man. And it was sound, it was cinematography, it was the story, and it's all there with The Last Dance, but they didn't put them together.
Yeah. Nas is like with Greg Foster.
Greg Foster, wow, man. It could have been done.
Nah.
Yeah. The end was hilarious.
I really wish they if they tried to make the Jazz cool, or they just played like weird like country music or like techno. Like
What's popular in Salt Lake City?
Yeah, like Massive Attack.
Well, they did that in episode 8, right? but a cover of Massive Attack from
Oh, Firestarter.
Rest in Peace Prodigy. I love it. But yo, what's up? No Common? Does Common feel slighted today?
He got to do all the intros.
Did he?
The man in the middle for Utah, and he knows he's bad. Greg Ostertag.
I know, but he wasn't a part of the Chicago documentary.
No Kanye, right?
No Kanye, no Twista, no house music, no Ministry, no Wilco. Like, I don't know. These are all like wonderful Chicago artists. Like, it's all New York, and then we got Pearl Jam. Like, what are we doing? Like,
I
and
gotta
materials
say,
matter to me.
I gotta say, Common's Resurrection or One Day It'll All Make Sense were both time appropriate.
Yes.
94 and 97.
And did Common do something to upset Michael Jordan? I don't know. Is he on Michael Jordan's Mount Rushmore of rivals now with Pizza and LaBradford Smith and B.J. Armstrong, the big four?
Ooh, he did have a line on Resurrection.
Uh-oh.
Resurrection Remix where he said something about, like, I'm paraphrasing. I'm not going to do my, like, Kool Moe Dee voice for him again.
Benny Buckets.
He said something about, like, don't fuck with the Bulls because they have too many white boys.
That could be it.
He did have a line that was more or less that.
If Jordan heard that, he might be like, Common's dead to me. He's my motivation.
Common's right. Hey, Luke Longley, check this new tune out. It's no Kenny Lattimore, but I think you'll enjoy it.
Jed Bushler. Get your swag onto this. I'm old. But I'm sorry. But yeah, no Kanye is interesting. I don't know. And, materials matter to, I think, all of us. And I think authenticity doesn't matter. So I'm not saying this music would make it more authentic. I'm just saying it would paint a really rich picture of the story that is being told to us. All you have to do is wonder what kind of music came out of Chicago at that time, and you are good. There was good music coming out of there.
Well, that's the interesting part about any of the musical choices, whether they were mining, boom bap, East Coast rap for stuff that occurred 5 years later, because they just wanted the idea that the 90s were a thing, that the 90s were not Puffy or Biggie, even though you hear Stuart Scott dropping like Biggie lines when he was announcing finals games. I mean, literally verbatim Biggie stuff. But they really wanted the 90s to feel like 5 years younger than it was. 5 years older, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where they drop like The Choice Is Yours or something. You're like, that was not what was out.
But
But
that
they wanted that vibe.
Was that important to you, though, for the time appropriateness of the soundtrack?
No, but it seemed like they took pains to do it, where they never played things that were
True.
newer.
True.
It clearly mattered to them. They weren't, using Trippie Redd songs or anything like that. They wanted to do that.
Right. They ended with like a newer Pearl Jam song, though, right?
Weird.
It didn't feel like a fully formed thought, for sure.
Did Lucchini ever get played?
Nope. Didn't hear it.
I'd like to think that we roasted that into being taken out. I mean, it was on the playlist. It was listed as being part of the show.
And oh, really?
Yeah.
Maybe I missed it, but I was paying attention.
So was a DMX, like Rough Riders Anthem or something.
I think I heard some DMX, but I'm not sure. But I was also promised Common and your boy, I forgot his name.
Were you actually promised it?
I thought it was on the playlist, but maybe it was someone's wish list.
Because they did have one that was, as far as I know, official, that was on Spotify.
Yeah, maybe that was the one I was looking at. And you say you influence it, like, just to...
I mean, I'm joking, but...
Right. But, the NBA creative world is small.
Someone had to take a stand against the use of Lucchini. I don't know. I enjoyed the last couple episodes. I enjoyed overall the entire process, and not to be sappy about it, but I thought having something to do on a Sunday night that involved basketball and made people talk about basketball and argue about basketball and contemplate Gary Payton or Charles Barkley. I liked that. I like that, not just for myself, but for basketball heads. And look, this was incredible for us as people who spend a lot of time making fun of these exact same ideas that this 10 hours specifically trafficked in. It was perfect. I loved it.
That is my first thought, and we've been talking about that feeling. I've been talking about that feeling, and I did a 180, man. I Joel Embiid it. Something's bad when that's your takeaway as a community, not just like when we're like, well, at least I saw a movie and I had some popcorn, and we love popcorn and we love movies. So yes, I did Star Wars Episode 1, but it was bad. And that's what people say about things that they can't really talk about. And like, I agree with everybody after Episode 10 who was like, shout out to the filmmakers who did this, who gave us something when we're hurting, like as a community and as a world, as a planet, we're all hurting. And to give us some joy is wonderful. And then I immediately was like, yeah, but we got future albums and artists are making stuff still. And whether you like Animal Crossing, like we're getting a lot of stuff. This was not enough, man. And I think
also this was going to come out anyway. So the idea that, wow, thank you guys for doing this. They just put it out early.
Yeah.
And that was cool. I'm glad they did. My thing is more that, look, they have Michael Jordan, a fascinating person and arguably the greatest player of all time. You also have a time in modern history that is unrivaled in terms of having a captive audience. Mm-hmm. You also have the basketball season that was supposed to be having its playoffs right now, cut short, suspended indefinitely. Who even knows what will happen? So given those advantages, it should have been mesmerizing. It didn't have to be great. I guess that's the dynamic here, right? Where you can say, well, we don't even have to give them credit for me enjoying it. Like, you don't get credit. I was going to enjoy it no matter what.
Yeah.
You had the footage, you had MJ, you had 10 hours to tell this story. We love basketball. So you showing me a clip of John Starks dunking on Michael Jordan, I don't have to say thank you for doing that. Like, that existed. Thank you, John Starks. Mm-hmm. Thank you to all the players who did these things.
Yeah.
It also was enjoyable in that way. I love the fact that people were just talking hoops, talking 90s basketball. People who weren't normally NBA heads, people who wouldn't have cared about the current playoffs, are talking about Dennis Rodman or, the style, or making Jerry Krause jokes. I think that I liked the expansion of the NBA tent.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, you don't see that phenomena with like Future's album. If you're not a Future fan, you don't tune in to listen to his record and make jokes about it. And
we would not have seen this if it was just the playoffs. We would not have seen the same amount of people or the same diversity of people who were talking about this and making jokes about it if we were watching the Nuggets against the Blazers. Oh, sorry. Nuggets, Blazers. Oh, Blazers on the playoff team.
So rested. Woo, I'm ready for the day. What happened?
Sorry. Anyway, yeah, Nuggets against the Thunder.
Yeah.
People would not be having a pop culture moment discussing it. So, big tent. I'm into that.
I mean,
just more patrons for cookies.
I'm running out of patience during the core, I think, because I'm running out of hyperbole because as we're inside longer and longer, I'm getting a tick more frustrated and the inability to do anything. And I think, I was so, up until like episode 7 or 8, I kind of changed with my stance on The Last Dance, where I'm just like, just get it over with. I want to move on because this thing is so flawed and it's gonna start so much reckless takeitude that I was like, all right, let's just start the bad takes. LeBron James sucks. All right, like just say it out loud so we can just move on from it. And we're seeing that a little bit. I've been seeing there's like a poll on NBA ESPN that says like people prefer Michael Jordan over LeBron for his the way he looks, the way he acts, and it's like 64% in favor of Michael Jordan, and I'm like, this is just recency bias because we just saw 10 hours.
Who is the better passer? Ooh, Michael Jordan. Oh yes, absolutely. That's a reasonable answer.
Who can recover from pizza food poisoning better, Michael Jordan or LeBron James? So obviously Jordan, but let's usher in the LeBron James era, because moving forward it's going to be LeBron James all the time, and I have him as one of the players who's better than Michael Jordan, one of the 10, and now we're going to have to frame that stuff with a different lens, and this era of talking about Michael Jordan as the GOAT is on its decline. It's like hitting the peak of a curve.
Well, I thought we reached peak quo a couple episodes ago, but that might be your new floor.
It's Patreon, man. It's just like, it's really set a new peak for me. Peak 2, more peak.
What a time.
I love cookies.
So what Patreon is going, and tell your thank you for listening. And if you're listening to this 4 days after the fact, thank you also. But we are available via Patreon for $5 a month, and we're going to give you as many episodes as we can.
We'd love to see it. Cookies.
Cookies.